discussion. But we'll not try to make it too serious. We'll try to make sense of technology. We'll try to make sense of AI and semiconductors. All of you are veterans in your own fields, and I think the topic of AI and semiconductors doesn't really need an introduction today. AI especially, a certain application called ChatGPT entered our lives sometimes in 2022, and suddenly everyone wanted to speak about AI and the magic that it'll create and the jobs that it'll take and so on and so forth. So it was interesting to see this entire conversation develop, not just among users, but also in the government from a public sector scale. And of course, then there is the entire central piece of semiconductors, which is very crucial for any technology, for any application today. So, Anamika, I'd like to start with you. You are at the epicenter of India's semiconductor journey, and you speak with a lot of stakeholders on a regular basis. We've made a lot of statements in the past few years in terms of the progress that we hope to make, and also with what's happening with government incentive-backed projects and so on. But at a ground level, do you think we've made substantial progress, and how big is the impact of what we're doing today in our journey towards being a developed economy?
Thank you, Souvik. Semiconductor is a very interesting topic today because it's the new oil. We all know about it. It has been there for years, actually. It's like almost there for a long time. What is differential today is that India, for the third time or the fourth time, has made an attempt, and we are there. We have finally got it right. And I think that really requires a lot of kudos. But let's take a step back and look at the entire industry, the way the ecosystem pans out. It's a $500 billion ecosystem. And you'll be surprised to know that $500 billion in terms of economy provides you a benefit of $7 trillion.
Right.
That's what it is globally. Now, coming to India, I think we were 14 generations behind in the technology, because the only place where the fabrication used to happen in India was SCL, and it was 180 nm.
Right.
Now, today is the day where we have already reached 2 nm. Now, that huge gap, thanks to the government, they started addressing with the PLI scheme, the DLI schemes, and the other schemes. So in a normal flow, if you look at it in a very structured way, the semiconductor ecosystem has 3 components: the design, the manufacturing. But in the manufacturing, the component is basically the front end and the back end. And the front end is nothing but the fabs. Right. The back end is ATMP, that's assembly, testing, and packaging.
Right.
And then you have the third part, which is talked about, the one that feeds into it, like electronic design, automation. Then we have the manufacturing equipment for the fabs and all these things. So it's very important that now we are talking about building that ecosystem in India.
Right.
And are we there? We have started with fabs. Great job. And you'll be surprised to know, to get one fab on, there are almost more than 500 parameters that need to be addressed, right from talent, which we were discussing, or to machinery, other know-how, or even the taxation or the power supply, the water supply, and everything has to be right. But even if you get it right, you don't get a fab, because each fab needs an investment of $2 to $3 billion. Right. Who's going to invest that? Unless you're found competitive enough against the rest of the countries that are competing with us. Because there are only 7 countries who have the technology and the ecosystem, which is US, Europe, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and that's it.
Right.
So how do we get it to India? Because all the other rest of the countries are competing for it. So kudos to our India that we finally broke it and we got it right.
Right.
But then there are 70 fabs being manufactured in the world. We have just 1 or 2 or 3. Right. So how do we break that? That's one part. Second part, very, very important, is design. Because if you have these fabs, how are you going to populate these fabs. You need the technology. And that's where we, as a different company called L&T Semiconductor, started. We are going to design for India. The IP will be owned by us. And that's a big task because you do not have the talent in the country.
Right.
And even the government is not. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Absolutely. Very interesting segue to make from semiconductors to AI. And with that, Sundar, I'll come to you. Based on what Anamika said, it's as rightfully, it's a start to our semiconductor journey. It's something that we had not done before. But when it comes to technology, we've shown to the world, in fact, when Amit and I were speaking backstage, he did highlight that the entire the tech stack that we've developed, be it in payments and be it in identity with the India stack, it's a clear example of the fact that we can develop products that are ideal for India. Now you represent the big tech side of the tech story, and of course the global technology conversations have progressed with big tech at the central point. Working for Microsoft, you of course have access to the resources, but Microsoft is not just a tech company in the sense that it has had a long history in India as well, be it in public services as well as private business. So from that standpoint, how do you approach India's AI push? There's of course that national AI mission, but of course from a requirement standpoint, from a localization standpoint, from a skill standpoint, how do you view India, and is it truly important to view India as a different geography in comparison to the rest of the world?
Great question. Thank you, Shavik, for the opportunity. So first up, I believe AI is one of the defining technologies of our times, right? And I think we all should be feeling incredibly fortunate that we are seeing in the midst of one of these revolutions that happens only once in a while. But we are seeing that, and India is able to participate, not just as just one of them, but we are probably in a great position to help the country accelerate its transformation as we go towards a developed economy, right? So I think we certainly at Microsoft believe that India has all the conditions, if you will, and the necessary conditions, like you said, is having the right skill set, the talent pool, and the industry, the government initiatives, all of that. And we want to be partnering with the government, sort of being a co-pilot of sorts in a way with the government and industry and the entire ecosystem to accelerate and to catalyze, right? And there is, I feel like in AI we have great tech-skilled manpower. The human capital is fantastic. We also have all the access, to the latest and greatest models. The applications are there, the commerce, and all of that is there. And India has a unique asset in terms of, I think the cultural and the linguistic diversity, for example, is another aspect where AI can actually democratize and kind of bridge these gaps in language barriers and stuff like that, and be one of the places where we can experiment and bring some of the solutions that the world can look forward to as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very important to understand that there's a need to build in India as well and not just consume in India. Ankush, I'll come to you. You, of course, speak with multiple industries as part of your role. And you, of course, speak on technology as an overall ambit and not just sort of divided silos. AI, semiconductors, they all seem to have one common piece that it's not as straightforward as making a few policies or announcing certain incentives. There's a deeper need to understand that we need to build IPs, we need to build core technologies, as well as skilling is one point as well. So from a strategy and a policy standpoint, where do you think we are? And I'll come to Amit as well on that. Starting with you, where do you think companies are right now, and where do you think the government is right now in terms of its understanding of the true ground understanding of where we are and what we need to do?
Sure. Shovik, thanks firstly for having me here. Good evening all.
Thank you.
Steve, I think when we talk about technology or semiconductors, because that's the flavor of the day, it's important to look at it, in three ways. Number one is, what is the dependence that we as a nation have today on the world around us for chips? Number two is, there is a new world order where global supply chains are getting realigned. And, what kind of an opportunity does that present for India, as everyone in the world is thinking about a China plus one strategy? And three, eventually it is then about, downstream, what's the opportunity for the electronics manufacturing sector when we talk about semiconductors? On one, again, I'll just throw some numbers because consultants always will talk about numbers. Our import bill on chips was over $20 billion in 2022.
Right.
It's going to be, the demand is going to be over $100 billion by 2030.
Right.
More than 99% of what we needed was imported.
Right.
More than 40% was imported from China.
Right.
Okay. So that's the environment in which we are operating today, right? And that is something that needs to change. When you talk about the second point, which is around the new world order, you have the US CHIPS Act, you have the EU CHIPS Act on one side, where nations and regions are trying to localize supply chains. That is leading to creation of overcapacity.
Right.
Because a TSMC wants to, needs to set up a factory in Europe, also in the US. Even India wants them to come here, right? There's only so much that any organization will be able to do, right? But at the same time, there are alliances like the Quad alliances, the Quad that's getting formed, right? So I think what really energizes me, to be honest, in terms of, in this context, when you talk about strategy and what the government is doing in terms of policy, the India Semiconductor Mission, I personally feel very, very excited about it.
Right.
This is the first time when behind a policy, we are actually putting the money where the mouth is.
Right.
There are pari passu arrangements. 5 projects have been approved.
Right.
$10 billion have been committed. Another 15 is on the way.
Right.
Beyond that, if I'm sure you follow the news because you make the news,
right.
on the recent visit that the PM had in the US, they're going to now set up a defense-focused fab in India, in an alliance between US and India. This is unprecedented. So I think these are the kind of things that are happening. So it creates a very interesting opportunity, both for private sector to contribute. And of course, I feel the government is really taking the right steps in making things happen.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Ankush, for that. Amit, I'll come to you on that note. Based on what Ankush mentioned as part of a new world order, as well as the developments that have happened. Now, you've spent more than 3 decades, and one of the key areas that you've seen evolve is infrastructure law. When it comes to technology, if we try to draw parallels with how infrastructure regulations helped development of infrastructure as an industry, do you think we're getting there? Do you think we're making the right steps, or is there something that's still amiss?
I think work in progress, if I would say so. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure being amongst technologists and people who are leading the thought on the process. But I'm reminded, if I were to start, not making heavy weather, but to quote Albert Einstein, a man that I admire a lot. He said, theory is when you know everything and nothing works.
Right.
Practice is when everything works and nobody knows why. We have put together theory and practice, nothing is working, nobody knows why. We are at that phase of our life where we are experimenting and trying to evolve something. We need to be a little patient.
Right.
But we need to be aware that this 4th industrial revolution, patience is also of few seconds, a few minutes. This is not going to be a few decades.
Right.
We did very well when we went ahead and got Nandan Nilankani, we had Rajiv Chandrasekhar. We did a fantastic job in getting our Jam Trinity, the UID.
Right.
I think there is a model for this government to emulate again. We have serious talent world over of Indians working at the threshold of and the cutting edge of technology. We need to harness them back in.
Right.
The growth story that India faces today, where we are strategically placed and where certain amount of boundaries and geographical issues are breaking down at the back of technology, is an opportunity to leapfrog if we get it right. Are we getting it right? We are partly there. Some of these moves are great,
Right.
but have we actually got that talent all around so that the ecosystem is ahead of the curve?
Right.
Not so sure. Consider, when Europe went into thinking about data protection,
Right.
it was 2012.
Right.
They came out with a law in 2016 and forced it in 2018.
Right.
We have come out now. They gave 2 years to implement.
Right.
We launched it in 23. Now in October, year plus, we are still waiting for the rules.
Right.
We need to change that. The
Right.
pace has to be higher.
Right.
Given that we had a lot to learn from Europe and EU and US, and given that we work a lot with them on that front, I think we need to do better.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
there's no reason for us not to aspire to do better
Right.
when we have learning at the cost of others who made it after significant efforts,
Right.
failures and successes. So I think we have a huge opportunity.
Right.
We are doing a lot of things right, but I think we need to do more.
Right.
I'm
Absolutely.
not still convinced that we've got the ecosystem fully there.
Right.
A law and legal and regulatory policy framework, every time it comes in and alters the scenario significantly, you can have huge setbacks on
Right.
innovation. And yet privacy, national security, terrorism are all significant concerns.
Right.
So the engagement has to be far deeper, far more intense.
Right.
You can't ignore one or the other.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's where we are.
Absolutely.
So it is purely Albert Einstein so far as I'm concerned.
It's wonderful that we had this anecdote. And Sundar, I'll come to you on this note. How do you view the regulatory landscape? Of course, a lot of AI development happens out of the India Development Center. Do you think the regulatory landscape is conducive enough right now, or are there more that you would hope to see, be it in terms of skilling or anything else?
Yeah, I think two things. I'd say we have principles of responsibly building AI. So we look at things like fairness, security, privacy, trust. A whole bunch of principled framework on how we build AI, and we are happy with partnering with anybody who's interested in making this more structured and working this. At the pace at which things are going, right, I think it's important in a way to also have a lot of guiding principles to work through this, because I think technology is moving much faster than probably regulatory frameworks and stuff like that.
Right.
And so we believe that having a good set of principles by which we are building our own products and services is very important, and we also package it in ways where the ecosystem, when it consumes our products and services,
Right.
can work with that in a responsible way.
Right, absolutely. Very quickly, Ankush, on this particular note, you speak with stakeholders globally, not just in India. How do they view the Indian market from, say, ease of doing business or from a regulatory landscape?
Sure. So, I'll just try and give you some data, because we serve talking about semiconductors, we work
Right.
with most of the global players. A year ago, when we were sort of talking to them and telling them that, why don't you sort of make the first move and get that advantage and come into India, they were like, we are overoccupied with too many commitments,
Right.
we're not thinking about it. 1 year down the line, today, most of the global leading organizations who are not looking at India, their boardrooms are talking about what is my India strategy.
Right.
Whether it be the leading chip maker in the US, or the leading chip maker in Japan.
Right.
They are all asking internally and then consultants like us, what should be our India strategy?
Right.
So that's how they're sitting up and taking notice of what has started happening in India. I fully agree with what my colleague said. Well begun is only half done, right? More needs to be done. But at least we've begun, right? So that is what is exciting.
Right, right. Anamika, you mentioned something very similar. In fact, when we were speaking backstage in terms of how global stakeholders, especially in the semiconductor ecosystem, are viewing India. What are your conversations like with them from a policy standpoint? And are they convinced that India's development journey, which is the theme of this summit as well, is on the right track?
So Souvik, I think everybody is on an exploratory mode. When we are talking to them, what comfort they are getting still is that they have partners like us, the L&Ts and the Tatas today, because Indian whole ecosystem can be very complex because we have the center and the state level. It's not easy for somebody to navigate through that. But the second part is, I think from a G2G point, there's a lot of clearances that need to be done at a, I would say, diplomatic level before the actual technology flows into the country also. So I think, and the investments, because when we talk about 10 billion, the number sounds good. But honestly, in the world of, if I would look at the semiconductor domain, 10 billion is absolutely a drop in the ocean. And more important, I think what they are viewing it as do we deserve to have the technology? Can we really manage it well? Do we have the talent today? No, we don't have the talent. We don't even have people who have actually worked on it really. When I say worked on a real, I would say a fab, we don't have them today. So I think there's a lot of to and fro, but then the effect is, as Ankush said, that they are exploring and they're looking at an India strategy. But are they willing to bet? I think for that the government needs to do more, and I'll tell you where. In the design side, because Make in India is not getting actualized here. It is fab in India.
Right, absolutely. In the interest of time, we still got 5-ish minutes, but we'll start the closing remarks process because it is a process. Amit, I'd like to start with you in terms of how you view 2047 is sort of like this deadline that we've set, the government has set for itself in the developed economy journey. Are there any key points that you expect to see change in India from a regulatory and legal standpoint for us to be able to achieve that?
I think we need to engage much deeper with the stakeholders in India and across. And it's time that we recognize that expertise in a particular field comes with experience. You can't get it from going to a college or getting a degree or two. And therefore you need to get people back in. We have a tremendous set of talent around the world. It's time to pull them back in. Along with that, the government has to get far more proactive, far more nimble. They're doing a great job, but there's a lot more to be done. The more you engage, the deeper your involvement, the lesser shocking or surprising changes will come down the line with investments.
Right.
And that's the big risk. People see India still as a mixed bag on country risk, on policy risk.
Right.
We need to remove that from the minds of people.
Right.
Unless we engage with that one reality, we will have a lot of people, as Anamika said, with their toes in the water, but not necessarily walking in.
Right.
Now that doesn't help us.
Right.
We need them neck deep with us and then swim the tide.
Right.
So I think that's where the change will be. Far more proactive, far more engaged, and taking those risks. Because when you start engaging with them and evolving frameworks, with a buy-in by the people who will put their money in, that's when you make the change.
Right, absolutely. Same question for you, Ankush.
Yeah. So, see, I think, when we talk about Viksit Bharat, and I'm sure we've spoken about it through the day, essentially, what is it? We're going to add 9 more Indias to the India today, right? We're going to become a $30 trillion economy.
Right.
Now, how is that going to happen, right? Broadly, when we've sort of done our estimates, I think our agri is going to grow by 5.5x, services by around 10 to 11x, and industries by another 12x.
Right.
So technology is going to play a very big role beyond AI, beyond semiconductors.
Right.
Right. So I think at some level, to what you were saying, the conversation needs to, of course, go granular, but also get elevated at the level of saying, what is the set of frontier technologies that we prioritize?
Right.
Healthcare on one end. We are going to have a far more number of aging people in the country. So how do we look after them in 2047? Versus space exploration, there's going to be a lot of space debris.
Absolutely.
Right? We will want reusable rockets. Right? So all of that is all going to come from technology.
Right.
So I think we need to sort of look at it with a full canvas, and hopefully we will all get there.
Right, definitely. Sundar, closing remarks from you in terms of where you see Microsoft's journey, especially related to AI.
Yeah, I see this as an opportunity of defining kind of nature, right? Like I said, I think we are already seeing some of the impact of what things like AI can do. We all are using AI in ways that we don't even know sometimes we are using. Like, when you're booking your tickets or when you're ordering food, or, we are doing all these things every day. And there is AI involved in, like, everything from supply chains to, customer relations tools and everything. And my point is, I think we need to not wait for something to happen. We are already in it.
Right.
And we should just go. Like, I'm a technologist.
Right.
I just want to keep going, right? And I think the most important thing is we have found great partnerships, both in the ecosystem and with what the government wants to do.
Right.
And we have skilling programs like Advantage India, where we have committed to skill 2 million people by 2025 in AI.
Right.
We have, like, coding programs for women, where we are getting 70,000 women, who are going to be trained and enabled. So skilling is a key aspect. The second one is, just continue and to embrace and adopt.
Right.
We are doing it. And like somebody in the panel before us just said, India is great at adopting technology. Nobody taught anybody how to adopt UPI. The whole of the country does, right?
Right.
So I think we are rolling forward, and we just need to keep that momentum and keep rolling forward, and I think we'll get there, right?
Absolutely.
And AI can be the catalytic force behind some of this Viksit Bharat
Absolutely.
vision.
Absolutely. Final remarks from Anamika. I'd like to wrap up with this one question which has always been asked in the semiconductor industry, that right now we're all speaking of legacy nodes. Even the fab that's been announced, they'll build older nodes for obvious reasons. By 2047, do you think we'll be able to get closer or maybe even catch up with the likes of Taiwan or the West?
I'm going to be very positive, because I can tell you today that L&T themselves tied up with IBM, we were in news, and it will be a 2nm mode, which we are looking at. So, no, but we have to develop it. We have to design it. We have to create the product out of it.
Right.
So 2047, the way we all are going forward, today we have one L&T, but we need 20 more L&Ts to come in.
Right.
And I'm very hopeful they'll come in with the right partnerships. I'm sure we can make it.
Right. Absolutely. And on that very optimistic note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us at the panel. It's been an honor to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shoaib.
Thank you.